So then, we are back with the modern understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of then as per Yeshayahu the prophet. Then we find ourselves studying the layers of the scripture. But then, what kind of person would explain so many areas of the scripture where so many scoundrels previously have showed up and they taught so much junk for centuries? When people begin to hear the truth, it's very similar of what the Messiah had to go through during his time. People were then listening to these people for so long. It was the same crap every time. And then when the Messiah came, they couldn't understand it. Because the Messiah was speaking of the same topic, however, he was enlightening with Galah. So then, from the, let's say, from the Greco translation of Ecclesia, what does it mean? You know, Igreja, church, doesn't exist. How the Messiah then wrote to those people over there in those 7 cities? It's very interesting because we read Revelation and we don't understand what the Messiah sometimes meant. Write to those revealed. But then we tend to be outside of the Holy of Holies, outside of tabernacling, and we always pointing the finger from afar. That's why many people, they can't be revealed. So the Messiah then wrote then to those who were Galad, or revealed. So write to those churches then? No. Write to those who are revealed. Because those revealed should then maintain what Moshe had started. But then, people heard so many scoundrels coming through the centuries, and then when they hear the truth, then sometimes they are skeptical. However, there is a distinction though. We are explaining of tabernacling in layers. Nobody else is giving you a behavioral procedure, or then scoundrels coming around speaking of their own dealings. You know, false people, hypocrites, going to those congregations where they find no enlightenment. It's the same old scoundrels every time. They come around. What do they listen? Some clap, you know, some singing of some sort. Some truly boring, junky, garbage songs. And a lot of them are mockery. You know, like a rose, trample on the ground. You know what it means? It's mockery. You understand when the Messiah, he died on the pole. Per the holy instructions, you can step on a holy dam of the Messiah. Has to be poured and then underground. Do you understand what the song means? It's a mockery. Mockery of the dam of the Messiah. Is that the reason why people go to those establishments, to make a mockery out of the Messiah? And they sing the song so dignified. Disgusting. They don't even know what they are singing. If it wasn't for the holy dam of the Messiah, we would be condemned. But then what's the distinction from scoundrels speaking of churches that do not exist versus those speaking tabernacling? Marvelously, even the Greco people, when they wrote the proper word tabernacling amazingly. After 1,000 years plus of lack of holy cities, then you find the Greco translation with a proper description. Churches do not exist. So let's analyze and verify what went on during the time of the holy cities. After Yohanan, then those 7 cities were then lined up and straightened out, and then cities started, tabernacling started, of the second tabernacle services. So then people would come around, they would receive very wise understandings of the future. Then they would do what those prophets were explaining, real prophets. Prophets of the Israelic lineage functioning in the tabernacle, or tabernacling in a camp. Then themselves, as people coming around and asking questions, and then they were being revealed, then they decided not to pay taxes to the local government, because they were evil. There they were, doing trade, and then being very friendly with the holy cities, and they were prospering. And the kingdoms around them, they were drying up. Monetary-wise speaking, in a symbolic understanding, they were drying up. So then the government not receiving enough taxes, and the cities being absolutely secluded, however, then the people around being prosperous, what was a normal factor? Send some spies over there, and then mention that you made a deal with them, that you have a lot of money, you want to make a deal with them, and then earn with them, and such. Now they would come around, and then in groups or congregations, speaking of their trades and such, and then would come out a spy over there, oh, got a lot of money, want to invest. They would speak of the Messiah, but in the form of prosperity, not truly salvation. Amongst those people who are not paying taxes, precisely that's what it was. But then we in America, we think, because for so long these scoundrels have taught so many situations wrong and twisted, and we always able to get our printing money to cover it up. Not this time. The truth of it is, tabernacling is returning, and churches never existed. Those were people then not paying taxes and formed then the middlemen. Welcome to the financial institutions. That's why when the Chinese system comes, you can be your own CEO and your own banker, because the middleman is gone. And the same problem as was before, people not paying taxes. So then, trying to circumvent what the Messiah has said is very dangerous. Because when the Messiah spoke regarding taxes, he was in the midst of those very important people of the government, and then also what they thought being important, the people of the law, and they were there in the square over there, and they were talking. And the Messiah simply said, give me a coin. What face is this? Caesar's? Huh? Give it to Caesar what belongs to him. Pay your taxes. Then do tabernacling. But then there were so many gods at the time, he said, then give God what belongs to God. Smart. He's extremely smart. It was the Creator himself speaking. But then we in America, we expect to do the same garbage and expect another result. Even though tabernacling is being explained. We find the Chinese system coming via the Pacific from the east, very solidly, very constant, reaching Malaysia, Singapore, the countries of the Pacific, and we are oblivious, trying to cling to those 1,000 years of garbage. You can write it down if you want. The next 36 months, when the Chinese system becomes available via computer, we are going to forget those 1,000 years. One can be sure of it. The Creator is going to show you how to do trade. If you think His holy prophecies were for children or mamby-pamby people with a quarter of a brain functional, oh no, you are mistaken. So then, what can we expect of the future? We understand Cyprus is part of the Eurozone, as it was explained before. Daniel the prophet said then the nations would try to come together, or kingdoms, and they would not adhere to each other. Precisely what he said. The Eurozone is breaking. Whatsoever is weak, what is strong is strong. If Germany decides to lead on the Eurozone, they have to pay out of pocket. And they have to bear the burden of the entire European Union. But then, it would go against the prophecies of Daniel, would not? I think it would, because Daniel said they would not adhere to each other. And the kingdoms would be divided. So it's not going to work. So then expect the Eurozone breaking, countries then being divided. But then the Creator very smartly, He's holding very wisely, because then He has to kind of direct in such a way, then when the nations they break apart from the Euro, then they have at least a escape area, and there is then the Chinese system. So His timing is absolutely perfect. So then, both popes, they had a conversation some time ago. Very shortly, they would exchange ideas, and not sure what the new pope had to talk with the previous pope, because he's out of duty, shouldn't be bothered. But for some reason, the new pope went over there, and, I don't know what he was doing over there for. Because he understands the previous pope was, and he is, a German. And German does not F around. But South America sometimes can be very fastidious. Sometimes unethical. And since we understand the Soviets are in charge of the G20 or the BRIC, Brazil, Soviet Union, China and India, They are in charge. Obviously, the new Pope went over there and asked some questions regarding, industrious. Being industrious, how can he change the ethics around the world? Because certainly is garbage. People are scoundrels beyond measure. Even in his own church, there are more scoundrels than any place else. So then Pope Benedict is out of duty. Leave him alone. Let him take care of himself and, enjoy his retirement. Get some scripture updating or whatsoever he has on his agenda, but it's kind of a strange visit. So then what can we expect of our country then? Well, as long as we are not taxing, there's not much that can be done. We can't circumvent what the Messiah has said. If we don't tax, we go under. So much for going through First, Second World War. And then we find ourselves then 36 months before our ruin. But then the government always trying to go a step further where there is no step to go any further. IMF already stated, and they are very regarded throughout the world. 2 years ago they said change our monetary system because we're not going to hold more than 5 years. And there we are, effing around, 2 years already gone, we have 36 months and no sign of tax reform. But then the government builds up FEMA camps, and then Ozarks, and then the mountain over there with 12 gates. Stupid. The U.S. government is 100% stupid. There is no other way of evaluating the situation. Never say they are unkind. But certainly they are stupid. They don't understand tabernacling. And we cling to those same junks of, Israel, Judeo-Christian junk, garbage. Never worked. Judeo comes from Jews. Jews, what is a Jew? Doesn't exist. It's a mixture of holy instructions and takanot maasim. And then Christian is from Greco translation. Doesn't exist. So then, are you saying then they set apart those serious people that died a long time ago? They trained for more than 1,000 years, and they were maintaining the oracles against sin, so then the Messiah would come and grant the rest of the world, they could sin as much as they want. You have to be stupid. And the Messiah has said, whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. Because there was a continuation from first tabernacle service to the second tabernacle services. So then let's rethink what the Messiah was speaking of. Then there were the set apart, trained for more than 1,000 years, every year, going through and waiting for the Messiah, being faithful, being there. And then comes the Messiah and gives license to sin to the others. If this was true, where do we find in the prophets that the Messiah would give license to sin? Because you have to understand layers. In Hebrews you can read, and the instructions are then the prophetic events of the future. It doesn't say the Messiah coming and then giving a license to sin.